издание на Еврозум. Мој гостин е портпаролот на комесарот за проширување Штефан Филе, Петар Стано.
Peter,
добар ден. Welcome in my program. My very first question, of course, is there was a Council of Ministers. Macedonia was non-issue. Today there is the European Council. Macedonia is again non-issue. Could you explain to us why?
Well, I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of the member states because these decisions, both by the General Affairs Council or Foreign Affairs Council or today by the European Council, is not made by the European Commission. The program of the discussions of the foreign ministers or of the presidents and prime ministers is decided by the Council. That's the member states. You have to understand the institutional divide in the European Union. So we have European Commission
I guess you
and
have
European
an explanation
Council.
because it's supposed to discuss about. It was supposed to discuss about your recommendation.
Well, it was never announced that this will be part of this Foreign Affairs or General Affairs Council or European Council. And even if it was, again, it's up to the member states to decide what they put on the program and what they discuss. So if the member states have seen that it's not necessary to discuss the issue of former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, they didn't put it on the program. We as a Commission, we don't have any part in this process to play. What we did
but
was...
you have information why there was no discussion about
I
Macedonia.
mean, this question needs to be answered by the, I don't know, the spokespeople of the Irish presidency or spokespeople of the Council. We as a Commission, we did our part. I mean, we negotiated with Macedonia, we had our rounds of high-level accession dialogue. We submitted our report in spring, where we stated the state of play in implementation of the EU-related reforms, which is very important, and also on good neighborly relations. So the Commission did its part, and since the ministers and since the member states didn't feel any need to discuss anything related to former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, they didn't. You have to note, however, on the other side, that what was discussed in Luxembourg by the foreign ministers and in Brussels by the prime ministers and presidents today, Serbia and Kosovo only. No other countries, no other decisions, because there was groundbreaking change, groundbreaking development in both countries agreeing on the normalization and starting to implement.
So there was no reason at all to mention Macedonia.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to explain you the events which led to the decisions of the councils this week, and these decisions were related to Serbia and Kosovo because there was groundbreaking development. Again, I cannot speak for the member states. The foreign ministers and the prime ministers, they obviously didn't feel the need to discuss Macedonia because they didn't see that there is something very specific, urgent or big to discuss and to take decisions.
Are you surprised by the fact that Macedonia was non-issue?
Well, it's not up to us to be or not to be surprised. The European Commission is doing its mandate, and our mandate is to do whatever we can with Macedonia to help it to advance on the European path. And I think we did what we were expected to do, because we not only established the high-level accession dialogue, that means re-energizing this EU-related reform process with Macedonia, but we also said that I mean, we continue this process. We reported in spring. We made recommendations already for 4 years now that Macedonia should start the accession negotiations. But then the end decision rests with the member states. There is not more that Commission can do. And we are still working with Macedonia. I can only recall the role the European Commission, together with the representatives of European Parliament, have played in trying to find a solution to the political crisis in the spring, which was ended by the 1st of March political agreement. And now what we are doing is we are waiting and we are assisting in any way we can so that this agreement is implemented and every single step of that agreement is implemented and we can continue and move Macedonia forward.
You asked for an in a spring report, you asked for implementation of the 1st of March agreement between the political party. The commission, the inquiry commission was established. So, I mean, what's the problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no problem as long as this committee of inquiry really works and delivers the necessary results. We said in the 1st of March political agreement, I mean, it was agreed by the political parties that the committee of inquiry will be set up quickly and will start to work as soon as possible. It started to work like a few days ago only. The councils have been taken place actually a few days after the final agreement on the composition of the committee of inquiry was found by the parties in Macedonia. So then there was not much space, I mean, to see any results. And part of the commitment from the 1st of March political agreement was setting up of the committee of inquiry, as a start of the process, not as an end game. And then the Committee of Inquiry needs to find out what happened on the 24th of December in the Parliament, needs to submit recommendations and for changes in order to prevent similar situations from repeating itself. So we don't have this.
So there is a delay, you want to say?
Well, I mean,
in Macedonia.
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean,
commission.
I can ask with the counter question: do we have the results which were established in the 1st of March political agreement? No, because we have Committee of Inquiry started to work only few days ago. So there are no results yet. We welcome the fact that it was composed. There was, I mean, it was the time to have it there so that they can start to work. Now they are working, but we need to see the results because that was the aim, that was the goal of this agreement, of this one part of the agreement. We need to have clear explanation what happened on 24th of December, why it happened, and what needs to be done in order to prevent such events from reoccurring.
So can we expect that in very soon, let's say in the next European Council, Macedonia will be an issue?
Well, again, I cannot speak for the European Council. It's not the European Commission who determines the program of the discussions of the member states. We, of course, I mean, next steps for the Commission.
But you're interesting to see that your recommendations are
of course,
treated are relevant for the Council.
Of course, when we make a recommendation, we want this recommendation to be adopted by the member states while respecting their decisions, because they have the power. I mean, it's their competence. We are lower in the chain. But for us, what is important, we carry on our work. For example, we have sent 2 European Commission experts to help the committee on the inquiry committee in its work. So we are continuing the work. We are finalizing, or we are, I mean, in the process of finalizing every year the annual progress report, which will be published as always in October. There we will assess everything what has been done in Macedonia over the last year, including the implementation of the 1st of March political agreement. So we will then make our assessment, and then it will be again up to the member states to see whether the necessary degree of progress was achieved, namely on the name issue, namely on the good neighborly relations, because obviously everybody knows by now that these are the 2 main stumbling blocks in the process of getting Macedonia to start the accession negotiations.
About the name issue, in the December Council, European Council asked for progress in the name issue. In the spring report, European Commission expressed some enthusiasm about the name issue, having in mind that Commissioner Füle was heavily engaged in the process. Do you have information what's going on with this process, where we are? Well, all we know is there is some proposal from Nimitz, but nobody knows what proposal it is, how the Greece and Macedonia react on this, where we are.
Yes, well, this is a process which is not being played in front of the media, obviously, because that's a diplomatic work, and it needs to have its procedures, its time. And the European Commission was saying right from the start, we fully support this process, which is led by the United Nations. So this is not a European Commission-led process. We are supporting.
Of course, the Commissioner have tried to help somehow facilitate the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, I have to clarify. I mean, this is UN-led process. The sole competence of the United Nations. It is the sole competence of the United Nations and Special Representative Nimitz to deal with this. We are doing what we can to support, to encourage both parties to find agreement. European Commission a few months ago has said that in our recommendation that we really think that it's necessary to tackle this issue, and that we can think about tackling this issue in parallel with the accession negotiations early in the process.
Let me be precise. The enthusiasm from April remain?
I mean, the European Commission is always enthusiastic because this is what we believe in. We believe in working with Macedonia, providing Macedonia fulfills all the necessary criteria and commitments and delivers on the commitments that we need to move the country forward, because this is what we promised. And Macedonia promised to do some reforms, improvements in good neighborly relations. So every step you make in order to fulfill these goals, we help you, we support you. So yes, we are enthusiastic.
Is there any steps?
Well, of course, I mean, there are steps being taken on both sides, basically, in Greece and Macedonia, because you have these talks going on.
Could we expect the solution for the name issue?
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, I mean,
there is no way there will not be a solution. The status quo is untenable. This issue needs to be solved, and I think everybody knows that it needs to be solved. Now the question is how quickly you arrive to the solution and how this solution will look like. But as I said, this is being dealt by the United Nations. Mr. Nimitz is in charge. The process is taking place behind closed doors, obviously. So I will not go into details of commenting that because it's not our role. The European Commission, as I said, we are supporting, we are really interested in this process, but we are not part of that process. It's UN, Macedonia, Greece.
What's next, Peter, for Macedonia? I mean, you have almost 4.5 recommendations if we count up April spring report. What's next? I mean, are you losing the Commission? I'm speaking about the Commission, the leverage in front of the ministers into the European Council of Ministers.
This is not about leverage of the European Commission. I think our best leverage are the facts. If we have facts on the table that prove that a candidate country or a country in the accession process is delivering on its commitments and is basically fulfilling all the expectations and criteria, then I think that's the best leverage and that's the best conviction for the member states to agree with our recommendation. If there are member states who don't feel that that country in question, be it Macedonia or any other country, that country doesn't fulfill yet all the criteria.
Which means that the ministers
or prime ministers, yeah, for the
don't believe anymore to what the Commission is saying.
It's not about believing. It's about having their own views, and because
which is different of the view of the Commission.
Of course, I mean that's the essence of the European Union. We are European Union as a project composed of different institutions and levels, and in the end, it's the member states who are in charge, who have the political steering, and who have the decision powers. The European Commission, we are instrument of the member states. We do provide recommendations, we do provide services for the member states, but it's up to them to make the decision. And you know that, like in human life, if you have discussion among people, everybody has, even based on the same facts on the table, everybody has different interests, different point of view, different experiences, different feelings. And you need to find a compromise between these factors among 27, soon to be 28 member states, because when the decisions about Macedonia will be taken, it will be already 28 member states, including Croatia, which is entering in few days' time into the EU.
What do you think about the comment of Rapporteur Howitt that Macedonia is in danger to lose the candidate status?
Well, it's not in the nature of my job, and it's not in the nature of the European Commission to comment remarks from our partners, especially if they represent other EU institutions. European Parliament, Mr. Howitt is reporting on Macedonia on behalf of the European Parliament. He has his views, and I mean he is expressing his views as we are expressing our views. I mean we have different fields of competencies, and it's not my role to comment his.
In your views, is there any such a danger?
Our views, I think, have been pretty clearly stated, and they are black on white in the progress report and in the April report. And I think the language from the progress report was crystal clear. I mean, for the fourth time, we recommend to the member states the start of the accession negotiations. And I mean, as I said, the next progress report, I cannot prejudge what it will finally say, but it will of course say, is there progress on EU-related reforms? Well, judging on the previous rounds of HLAD, yes, there was progress. Judging on the April report, yes, there was progress. Then we will judge if there is progress in implementation of the 1st of March political agreement. Is there a progress? We are seeing progress in certain fields, certain areas needs to be still fulfilled, but there is progress. Do we see progress on good neighborly relations and reconciliation name issue? We will have to see what the next weeks and months will bring in order to make some kind of final assessment. But in terms of, I mean, as far as the European Commission is concerned, we have never put black on white that we would be considering the option of Macedonia losing candidate status as long as Macedonia fulfills the necessary criteria.
There was a Speak Up conference last week here in Brussels organized by DG Enlargement. What about when you're talking about the reforms? So what's the conclusion? What's your opinion where we are with the reform in the field of the freedom of the media?
Well, I think the assessment was, I mean, the reason of Speak Up is not to make like a final assessment of the situation. It is rather to discuss with the media, because that was conference about the media, for the media, and for people who are active with the media in their professional life, journalists, analysts, politicians who have influence in creating conditions for the media. So our assessment of the media landscape in Macedonia is given every year in the progress report. I mean, there were still some issues outstanding since last progress report. We have seen some laws being adopted, some changes. So we will provide assessment in a few months' time.
Some journalists are in prison.
Yes, and this is the second point I wanted to raise, that the aim of Speak Up was exactly discuss these challenges and to compare what is the situation now as opposed to the situation 2 years ago when we discussed in this big style with journalists and with media.
Is there any difference between the first Speak Up and second Speak Up?
In terms of output, or in terms of content, or
in terms of improving the situation?
I think there is one big difference is that after, as a consequence,
2 years ago there was no at least journalists in prison, but okay. Now
in Macedonia, you mean? Yes, because we have other countries where journalists are in prison. Of course, every time a journalist is jailed, we are concerned. But then we need to see whether he is jailed based on what evidence. If he gets fair trial, it doesn't mean that if you are a journalist, you can never end up in jail. I mean, if there is like strong case against you, then okay, everybody is. I mean, nobody is above the law. So if what is important for us is that the journalists are not prosecuted based on what they do as journalists, provided they stick to respecting the law and the professional standards. So
by the way, the Reporter Without Border asked the Commission to ask Macedonian government for an explanation.
And we are asking, of course. I mean, every time, and this is the second point I want to mention regarding the speaker, that we are paying huge attention to this area, freedom of expression, freedom of media. This is part of the negotiating process, and this is part of set of few top priorities that we are really watching and assessing and seeing. As Commissioner said, if you want to see the state of democracy in a country, it's enough to look at the media index, at the state of the situation, state of the play in the media. And of course, this is being taken into account by us when we negotiate with our partners, with the official representatives, and we are telling them, look, there are some problems, we need clarifications, we need changes, this is not good, this goes against the European principles, against the European legislation, etc.
When you're talking about the index, Reporter Without Borders and the Freedom House, for example, are they relevant for you?
Of course.
Because they are not for the government of Macedonia.
Well, for the European Commission, these are all important indicators, apart from our own analysis, because we are not relying only on others. When it comes to having proper information about what is going on in Macedonia, we rely on our own experts, our own delegation, our own diplomats, member states diplomats, because you are being watched by everybody in the EU. Everybody, the diplomats in Skopje are watching what is going on in the country. They are reporting back to their headquarters, and we are sharing all the information. We have our own people there, so we know exactly what goes on, what is good, what is wrong, where changes are needed. And you know, we made the situation of the media part of the high-level accession dialogue as well. And if you connect these dots, Speak Up 1, high-level accession dialogue, focus on media as well, progress report, place of the freedom of media in the accession process, Speak Up to recommendations.
After second Speak Up, do you think that you have to change something in your strategy towards implementing more substance in the freedom of the media?
Well, I mean, not really changing, because we are already very firm in demanding the accession countries to focus on these areas and to make sure that there are improvements in this area. And we are saying you will not get away with the situation if you ignore improvements or the necessary changes in this area. You cannot go on you cannot progress in the accession process if you have a situation where you limit the freedom of the media in any way. So I think they know, and our insistence on proper implementation, I think, is good enough in order to make it quite clear to the partner governments what they need to do. And if they slow down, then of course they are slowing down the whole country in the accession process.
Thank you, Petar. Това беше интервюто со Питер Стано. Гледавте Еврозум. Ви благодарам за вниманието. Се гледаме во наредното издание.